Hey everyone, welcome back to another web hosting video tutorial. In this video, I will walk you through the setup of a load-balanced WordPress website on the Lightsail platform. Now, I have done this tutorial in a previous video, one of my first few videos I've done, walkthrough of setting up a load-balanced WordPress website in Lightsail. And in this video, we'll do the same steps. However, in this tutorial, I am going to use the new object storage that's available in the Lightsail platform, which makes it very easy to connect an S3 bucket to your Lightsail WordPress-based instance. Here's a diagram that we will have finished set up after I'm done with this tutorial. However, you see this distribution CDN section. That will be done in a different tutorial. So subscribe if you want to see or if you want to get notified when I publish that video. So without further ado, let's get started. To get started, I will start creating my first WordPress instance. So from the Lightsail dashboard, I'll click on Create Instance, choose your instance location. For the platform, pick Linux, Unix, and then for the blueprint, click on Apps plus OS, and then pick the WordPress blueprint. Then choose your instance plan. I'm going to go ahead and go for the $10 plan, and then give your instance a name. I'll just keep this as the default and click on Create Instance. All right, so while this instance is coming up, if you are migrating an existing website that is already on the Lightsail platform, then all you need to do, you probably need to skip this step. You don't need to create another instance. You can go to the next step that I'll show you, which is to create the database service and set up the object storage. If you have an existing WordPress website and that is not on the Lightsail platform, then you'll want to follow the steps and migrate your website over to this instance first, and then follow on the steps to create the load balance setup. So those are two things that I won't show you here. I'm just going to show you how to create a brand new instance for a brand new website. Once this instance is up and running, I am going to set up a sample WordPress website using a theme and some dummy content for this tutorial. All right, here is the WordPress instance. Go into the instance dashboard. I'll click on networking, and I'm going to create a static IP address and have it attached to this instance. The next thing that we're going to do is add a sample theme and some dummy content to this WordPress instance. So let's come back out here. Here's your IP address. Copy the IP address, go to your browser, and okay, the website is up. So the instance must have completed its provisioning steps. Now, the next step we will do is go into the WP admin and set up the dummy theme and content. So the username and password will be, the username is user and the password I need to get. So I will click on the web-based SSH terminal and cat bitnami application password. Copy this password to my login screen. We are logged in. So under themes, I am going to add a new theme. Install this Neve theme and activate it. And then we will try one of the starter sites. I need some of this, so install and activate. So we'll just pick this theme. Import. So just for this tutorial, I have included or installed a theme, imported some dummy content so that we can have a site besides the default WordPress theme and no content. So here's the content. So the next thing we will do is set up an external database service. So as part of the load balance setup, as we saw in the diagram, we need to move the database from this WordPress instance to an external database service, and Lightsail provides one. So if you click on from the dashboard databases, we'll create a database and we'll move the MySQL tables and database that were part of the WordPress instance over to this once it's provisioned. So on the create a database page, select your database region. You do need to keep in mind that this region and availability zone, I believe, should be the same as your WordPress instances. So just make sure those are the same. Leave MySQL selected and the latest version. You have the option of specifying login credentials. And if you don't put anything in here, the default is DB master user. The password will be created for you. And then you can specify the database name. If you don't provide one, then the master database name is DB master. Choose your database plan and then give your database a name and create database. So now this will take a few minutes for the database to get provisioned and available. And so once it's done, the next things we will do is export the MySQL database from the WordPress instance and then import that database into this database service that we just created. That way the database is now on its own separate infrastructure, and we eventually create two or more WordPress instances. Those WordPress instances will connect to this single common database. Okay, the database service is up and running. So the next thing we need to do is create an export file from our WordPress instance and then import that into this database. Now, the reason we needed to make sure that the database and your instances are in the same zone and region is because this database and the instances need to be able to connect to each other. And they can only do that if they're in the same region, as you'll see right here. Only your Lightsail resources in the same region as your database can connect to it. So for this reason, we want to make sure that the zone and region are the same as your instances. To export the WordPress database from your instance, we will go into the SSH terminal. You can use the web-based one, but for this tutorial, I am going to use a client SSH client software. I am going to use Bitwise SSH client for Windows. And if you're on a Mac, you can use PuTTY, or if you're on Linux, you can use PuTTY, and PuTTY also is available for Windows as well. I just prefer Bitwise for my needs. And here we go. So inside the terminal, the command to create and export database in MySQL is called the MySQL dump command. So you will start by typing in sudo mysql dump -u for user, root -p for password, and we'll provide the password once we hit enter. And then you'll provide the database name. For Bitnami-based WordPress instances, the database is bitnami_WordPress. And then we'll send it to a file. So you put the greater than sign and type in a file name. So we'll say database.sql. So now once I hit enter, it will prompt me for the password. The password is the same one that we used to log into the WordPress admin. Hit enter. It will ask me for the password. Right click, and the clipboard contents get pasted. Hit enter. And if you did not receive any errors, and if it was successful, you should be brought back to the command prompt. Now, if you do ls, you'll see that there's a file called database.sql. So this has the entire WordPress database for the site that we just created. Now with this database, we will import that into the database service that we just created. So for that, we'll run the command from the same SSH terminal. We'll do sudo mysql -h for connecting to a remote host. If you were connecting to a database on this same server, you don't need to provide the -h parameter. But since we're going to connect to a remote external database service, you have to do -h and then the host name. So we'll come back to the Lightsail dashboard, come over to databases, click on your database service, and your endpoint here is the host. So we'll copy that, right click to paste it. Then we'll provide -u parameter for user. And since I did not modify the user name when the database service was created, it will be db master user, which is the default, -p for password, and then the database name. And again, I did not modify it, so the default is db master. And in this case, we'll do a less than sign, and then the name of the file that we used to create the export, which was database.sql. Now this will prompt me again for the password. So I want to, before I hit enter, I'll come back here and I'll say show password. And I will copy this into my clipboard so I have it available. Click on my SSH window, hit enter, will ask me for the password, right click so the clipboard is pasted, and then hit enter. And again, if no errors are returned and you're brought back to the command prompt or terminal prompt, that means the database import was successful. If you do run into errors, then the best thing I can recommend is find the error and search on Google and see if there are any answers to the errors that you're getting. So now we have our database on an external database service. The next thing we'll do is set up the object storage. That's part of the new offering in the Lightsail platform. And we'll go back to our dashboard, click on Home, click on Storage, and then click on Bucket or Create Bucket. Now this is primarily going to be used for all of your media files. So any images or any media items that you upload into WordPress, you want those to also be stored on a shared location so that your multi-instance setup will always refer to the same S3 bucket to pull that media item and render it. So we'll create a bucket. Again, make sure it's in the same region. Well, actually, in this case, it might not be needed. It's not required to be in the same region. But just for simplicity or consistency's sake, just make sure you're in the Virginia region. Pick your storage plan based on the amount of storage that you need for your website. And then you can give your bucket a name, or you can just leave it the same, and that will set up a domain name for your bucket. And then hit Create Bucket. Now your S3 bucket is provisioned. You can click here for permissions, and then we will change the permissions, and we will pick the last option here, or actually individual objects can be made public and read-only. So this is what we want. We want the objects to be public because it's on a public website, but we also want this storage to be read-only, and so that external public users cannot store objects or create objects in your S3 bucket. So we'll hit save, or actually, let's see what else we need to do. Attach an instance. So we'll hit save, hit yes, save. And then we need to attach an instance. So you click on attach instance. From the drop down, you will pick the instance that we have. Hit attach. And you can come back here and attach more instances. So you'll see that when we create the second instance, or if you create more than one instance, you'll be able to attach additional instances here. So we'll do that. And I think that's it for here. Now let's go back into our WordPress website, go back into the WP admin, and we will add a plugin. And you just search for S3, and the plugin that we need is WP Offload Media Lite. Install that, click on Activate, and then we'll go and set up the plugin. So click on Settings and Offload Media Lite. Then we'll click on my server is on Amazon Web Services, and I'd like to use IAM roles. Click on Next. And then we'll have the providers Amazon S3, and then browse existing buckets. And it should have your newly created bucket listed here. Click on that, and then save selected bucket. And here is your URL preview. And in these settings, the only thing that I think we may want to turn on is, actually we do want to turn on for HTTPS, and we'll also want to turn on remove files from the server. And this is maybe an optional item for you. What makes sense for you, you can do that. But this is an option where once all of this is configured and you upload media items to your WordPress website, and this plugin will copy it over to the S3, you can select this to have it removed from the local instance as well, if that's something that you want to do. So I'll turn that on and hit Save Changes. Okay, I think we have everything configured. So the next thing we'll do, let's just go ahead and test and upload and see if that works. So these are all existing images that were part of my dummy content that was installed when I set up the theme and content. So these are not on the S3 media object bucket storage that we just created. These are still on the local server. As I mentioned, the plugin that we have does not transfer existing items, only new items after the plugin was configured. So you will have to, if you have an existing website and you have lots of media items, you'll have to do that manually. You have to move those manually to your S3 bucket. But if you upload a brand new item, so we'll hit Media Library, Add New, select Files, and yeah, this is good. And you'll see that the media item was just uploaded. Now, if I click on this and you see the path, the file URL, you'll see that it's now pointing to the bucket that we just configured. So that means that this file should be now on your object storage and not on the local server. So we can also verify that by going to Lightsail, going to your bucket section, click on Objects, and now you'll see that there is a WP content folder. You click on that, your uploads folder, 2021, 11, and here is the image and the various versions that were rendered out. So that's an indication that our plugin is set up correctly and our configuration for this object storage is working. Now, what I did mention is that if you have existing images that's part of your website, you can upload them here, or you can use a S3 client that can connect to S3, and you can do it that way as well. But somehow you'll need to get your existing website images uploaded to the S3 bucket. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is modify the WP config file, and we'll change the database connection string to now use the database service that we just created earlier. So back into our SSH terminal window, find the WP config. So for this, it will be under stack/WordPress, stack/press. Oh, I had a spelling error earlier. And then there's the WP config. So I will use the VI editor, wp-config.php, open that up for editing. And then what we want to do is modify this right here. We're going to modify the database name, the user, the password, as well as the location. So instead of the local host or the local database, we're now going to have it connect to the database service that we created. So let's go back here so we can get the necessary information. So let's start with this, copy, and back to the SSH terminal, I for insert, and then hit the delete key to remove localhost. Leave the :3306 there because that's the port that MySQL runs on and listens to. And here we'll do shift insert, and that should insert the endpoint that we just copied where my cursor was. So that's there, hit escape. Let's do the same thing for password. I for insert, and hit the delete key to remove the existing password. Let's hit show password, copy the password to my terminal, shift insert. There we go. Same thing for the database user. We'll hit delete to remove it. I'm already in the insert mode, so I didn't hit I again. The database user was right here. I don't need to copy, but DB master user, DB master user. And then the database name is DB master. Okay, so once we have these changes done, hit escape, and then we'll hit the colon key, W key, and Q key for write, and then quit. So that quits the VI editor and writes the file, saves the file. So now that we have our database connection strings done, let's go ahead and test out the site and make sure it's still working. So come back to our WordPress website. Let's visit the site. And it is still working. That means that we are now using the S3 object storage for media assets, and our database service is being used for the WordPress database. So now the next step at this point, before we hit to the next step, at this point you have your instance configured the way it should be for a load balance setup. So you have the WordPress instance, you have the external database service, and you've configured the object storage for your media items. So everything is in place. The next thing we need to do is duplicate this instance, make a snapshot, and create another instance from this snapshot. So that's what we will do next. Let's go to Instances, click on WordPress, click on Snapshots, and then create a snapshot. Before I do that, I am going to log out of the SSH terminal. I've noticed in the past that having it connected just takes a little bit longer for the snapshot to be created. So exit out of any SSH connections and then create snapshot. And this usually takes anywhere from between 5 to 10 minutes. And once it's available, we'll be able to create another copy of this website on another instance. So I'll come back once this is ready. Okay, my snapshot creation is complete. So from here, you can click on this menu icon and you can create new instances, copy to another region, or export to an Amazon EC2 if you wish. But we will create new instance. So we're making a copy of the website. Pick your instance location again, probably leave it the same as your original instance. Pick the instance plan, identify your instance with a name. I'll just leave it here and then click create instance. And you can create as many instances as you want based on your needs for your load balanced environment. So we'll give this a few minutes and that should be up and running. And since we created a snapshot from this first instance that we already configured with the database service and object storage, we don't need to do that again for the second instance. That's why we did all of that up front before making instances from that copy. Okay, so the second instance is up and running. So what we will do next is create a static IP address. We'll do that. Create static IP address and attach it to the instance. Here's our second IP address. So now the next step will be to set up the load balancer so that we can balance traffic between these two instances. So click on the networking tab in the Lightsail dashboard, create load balancer, and then again, I would just make sure, keep this in the same region as all of your other services you just created. And then load balancer, create. There we go. And then second step would be to add the instances to the load balancer. So here, select your first WordPress instance, attach it, attach another instance. So we'll select the second, attach that. And if you have more than two, just keep attaching. And this will take, again, another few minutes to complete this process, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so the process of attaching has completed. Health check is passed. Now we'll click on inbound traffic, and we need to attach an SSL certificate to our load balancer. So to do that, we'll create certificate, or we'll click on create certificate, and we'll type in the domain that you intend to use for your website. So I will use www.mdub.site. And if you have any alternate domains, you can put those in here at this time so those certificates get created. Well, once you're done, click on create. And this will give us a validation CNAME record that we need to create at our domain registrar. For this domain that I'm using the Lightsail DNS zones. So I'll show you how to do that in Lightsail. But if you have your domain DNS managed by a domain provider or domain registrar or somewhere external, then just know that you'll have to create these entries there. So what we'll do is copy the CNAME name part, go over to, actually what I'm going to do is right click, open this link on a new tab. So I have the Lightsail dashboard in two tabs just to make it easier for copy paste. Go over to networking and then click on my DNS zone. As I mentioned, it's in Lightsail and I don't have any records. So we'll click on add a record. We need to add a CNAME record, and we'll paste the value I just copied. Now I copied the entire string, but as you'll see that in Lightsail, the .mdub.site is already there. So I'll just remove that part from my string of copied string. And so just leave it at www. And then that maps to a value. So we'll come back to this tab and copy the value here, and then hit check mark for save. And then over here, this notice up here, it does say it takes up to 72 hours for Lightsail to verify that we own this domain, or to verify this record was created correctly. Usually I've seen it only takes a few minutes, but just come back here and make sure that this validation has completed. If it hasn't completed in 72 hours or so, then there's a chance that you might have missed some step here, or may have copied this incorrectly, or something is not right here. Usually it only takes a few minutes, but like I said, one way you can verify that this is correct is going over to a service like DNS Checker and copying the name part over to a service like DNS Checker, paste that here, remove the ending dot or period. From this drop down, select CNAME and then hit search. and it should point to the value that we just created or we just set up in our DNS record. So you'll see that it starts with _19 B8. So if we look at the Lightsail, that is _19 B8. So we set up our DNS CNAME record correctly. So that's one way you can validate or ensure that at least you have it set up correctly. Now you just have to wait for this to complete. Sometimes if you hit refresh, Lightsail dashboard isn't refreshed, you'll see that. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so status of my SSL certificate is valid, but I have not used it yet. So to use it, we'll need to come up here and click on select an SSL TLS certificate to enable HTTPS. Select the one that we just created. And here we go. So we have done everything in the load balancer part. The last step is to now point www.mdub.site, our domain name, to this load balancer. And if you're using a DNS provider other than Lightsail, then you'll copy this DNS name and you'll create another CNAME that points to this as the value. But since I'm using Lightsail, I just need to go over to the Lightsail DNS management interface, fresh, and we just need to create add record. Leave this the same. I'll put www in front for the site that I'm using and just point it to this load balancer that we created. That should start propagating as well. You can come back here to the DNS checker website and type in www.mdub.site. It's a CNAME, so let's see if that works. Or actually, it's a record, right? See if that points. Okay, so it's starting to resolve and set up. So if we come back to our website, instead of the IP address, I should be able to just type in https www.mdub.site, and seems like it is resolving. So if we click around here, see, but the images are not showing up, so we'll have to see what's that about. But so far, everything seems to be working. Now, one other thing that we need to do to our load balancer is on this same inbound traffic page, come down and enable session persistence. So this is good if you have a e-commerce site or some sort of a transactional feature to your website. You want inbound traffic or your customers or your visitors to always connect to the same instance as they're browsing the website. You don't want them to get load balanced from instance 1 to instance 2 or vice versa while they're doing some sort of a transactional activity on your website. So always, I usually tend to select this, and it just makes it for a better experience for the end user. So select that, and I believe that should be it. If we go back to the website, I am not sure why some of the images are not showing up. I'll have to debug that. If I do an inspect. Oh, okay. It's because of the mixed content issue, and that's why they're not showing up. So one thing that we still would need to do is update the content to now use the domain name instead of the IP address. So if we go to our WP admin, get my password, paste it. So once we're inside our website, then one thing that we need to do is go into our content, for example, about us, and we'll need to update, for example, this location. So this is going to be different based on how the content was created or how your images were pasted in. If they're using relative URLs, then all of this should work. If they were using absolute URLs, typically you'll see that in CSS files, or if somebody just copied an entire URL and pasted in the content, then those images would break. So you'll have to do something, some cleanup activity once you have your domain set up on your load balanced environment. One thing that I would suggest you look at is I have a video on WP CLI usage. And if you check that out, I do show you command line utility in WordPress that you can use to do a search and replace. So you could do a search for all the URLs that start with your old domain or your IP address, and then replace it with your domain that you're using for the site. So you can do those kind of things with the WP CLI, and I have a video tutorial on that you should go check out. Oh, actually, one more step we have left to do. We need to attach the second instance to our object storage. So back in the Lightsail dashboard, click on Home, click on Storage, and then click on your bucket, click on Permissions, and then here we have only one instance attached. So we'll have to attach our second instance as well. Hit Attach, and that should work as well. So now we have completed the entire setup for a load balanced WordPress website. One of the things that I haven't found out or haven't found a solution for is how to solve the issue of themes and plugins. Remember that our object storage is only used for the uploads, so your media content. They're not used for your themes and plugin files. So updating plugins, updating themes, those still have to be done on all of your instances manually. And the way to do that is you may not be able to use the domain name because you don't know which instance you're going to get sent to by the load balancer. So what you would have to do is use the static IP address to log into each instance individually and either add a plugin or update your plugin, and likewise do the same thing for themes and any other items that you need to do for each of your WordPress sites. So I have not found a way, and I don't think that feature is available in the object storage. Maybe that is something Amazon will add in the future, but right now it's not. But if you do have any ideas, or if you know of a way to do that on both instances without having to log in, then please let us know in the comments below, and that will help out me and others as well. The last part of this tutorial was to set up a CDN service using the Lightsail distribution capability, and I will do that in a second video. This video is already long enough, so my second video or second part of this tutorial will be the setup of the Lightsail distribution service for this setup. And if you'd like to get notified when I do publish that, do subscribe to the channel and subscribe to the notification icons. However, that second video is really optional. You can just leave everything as is here and your website should function just fine. If you do want caching available, then you'll have to follow my video to create a distribution, or you can also put another service like Cloudflare in front of your entire setup, and Cloudflare will also take care of some caching as well. So there are two options, and you can pick that should you need that for your setup. All right, so I hope you found this video tutorial useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or run into any issues, please note them down in the comments below, and I'll try my best to answer them. If you would like to get notified when I publish the second part of this video, which is to connect a CDN or distribution to the setup that we have just done, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and subscribe to the notifications so that you get notified when I publish it. Again, thank you for watching, and until the next video, take care.